Hello, everyone. We'll be getting started shortly. Thanks for joining. Okay, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the November 2023 edition of Green Infrastructure, Climate and Cities. This is a monthly seminar series that started about 10 years ago now, focusing on the unique challenges that climate change pose for cities and what we can do about it. The seminar series is funded by NOAA through the Climate Adaptation Partnerships through CC Run, the Consortium for Climate Risks in the Urban Northeast, which is a consortium of universities focusing on this. My name is Franco Montalto. I'm one of the co-PIs on CC Run. If you're joining us for the first time, all of our previous seminars have been live cast and recorded and are archived on the CC Run website. We're going through a change in the website, but you can access our previous seminars there. And for any professionals seeking continuing education credits, those are available for attending our seminars. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, so this month's seminar focuses on a new film released today, focusing or entitled Higher Ground, Restorative Science and Sustainability. And it was produced by Ben Kalina, a filmmaker and Drexel professor, who's been working in this area on climate change related films for a long time. After we hear a few comments from Ben about his work and his goals in making the film, we have a panel discussion that will be facilitated by NOAA involving individuals from the communities that are described in the film. And I'll let our panelists introduce themselves when we begin the discussion portion of the presentation. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Ben to talk a little bit about the film, about his work, and just to launch the presentation. And I will present the film, Ben, after you give your comments.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben. As Franco introduced, I am a Drexel faculty member in the film and television department, and I am also a filmmaker for a long time. My films in general often have a science focus, or more precisely, a climate focus. I've also made a number of different films that touch on community programs and other kinds of aspects of the fabric of our communities. And I often have a couple, like I think of my filmmaking as both an educational, informational, endeavor, but also it's about finding ways to connect the ideas that I'm exploring to opportunities for change, whether that's a broader social change or awareness, or in this case, in this project, really hoping to find a way to make some concrete local impact, policy impact, and community impact. And so I often have a film that's kind of a big global project, and I do right now, which is a story about solar geoengineering, which is about as big and global as it gets. But then I also try to have a project going at the same time that's really focused on much more of a grounded local issue. And for me, as someone who's lived in Philly now for almost 20 years, I am just really curious and I guess concerned and also aware of the way in which climate change is impacting neighborhoods and communities throughout the city in little sort of my backyard. And so with this project, knowing Franco previously and having just getting a sense of the kind of work that he does outside of Drexel, I was really intrigued by initially what was going on in Eastwick, and then also in Camden. And so for me, what's really striking about this storyline, if you want to call it that, although it's really obviously real life and playing out in people's lives right now, is that it's an example of a situation and a pretty obvious example of a situation where climate change is having an impact now, and one that will continue into the future. And without intervention, it will, according to all the science, get worse. And so the question is, what do we do in this kind of a community, with this specific problem that's dealing with like flooding, intermittent flooding, that is quite devastating. And then in Camden, where there's another flooding issue that has a different set of circumstances behind it and potentially a different set of solutions. And I see this project that you're going to watch in a few minutes as like the beginning of a larger project that deals with several interconnected neighborhoods in Philadelphia in particular, and how these neighborhoods are dealing with different aspects of climate change adaptation. Because I think the only way I think we're going to find a solution here is through the kinds of layered interdisciplinary approaches that the community is looking at in terms of finding solutions, that Franco and other scientists are looking at, that civic organizations, institutions are looking at. These are not projects that you can kind of solve with a one-size-fits-all approach. And so what I'm trying to tease out in this project as a starting point is, how do you kind of go through that process that is messy, and the film briefly references urban renewal in the 1950s and 60s, which I think was a very top-down approach to thinking about how to, change communities and move them into the future. And so what I'm really interested in is sort of a bookend to that. Like, how do we think about an urban renewal, if you want to think of it in those ways, that works for the citizens, that's driven by the citizens of different communities and neighborhoods, meets their needs now and prepares them for the future, and then is supported by the work of scientists, engineers, politicians, and others. And so like this film is a way to just start getting at that question of how do you kind of let those ideas emerge from the community level and then support them on the way out. And I think I'll leave it there, probably.
Thanks so much, Ben. So with that, we will watch the film, and let me share my sound, screen 3. I will start the film and mute myself, and we will see you on the other end.
Typically, when you and I would do pitter patter raindrops, sound. For some people, they're up walking the floors all night, trying to figure out what they can salvage, worried whether or not that water is going to come in their homes or if they have to evacuate. Looks like the tide might be just coming back in. Hopefully, the hardest rain is over and we won't have to worry about this overflowing. If the tide is in, you have a torrential downpour that will affect the level of the creek, causing it to overflow. I refer to our community as an environmentally hazardous sandwich. The Eastwick community is the southernmost part of the city of Philadelphia. A very quiet, middle class, predominantly African American neighborhood. We're at the bottom of the watershed. We're at the convergence of 2 creeks. Water rolls downhill. You have water coming in at a very intense rate, filling people's homes up to 8 feet of water. Some people have been flooded up to 10 times.
I was first introduced to Eastwick in 2012 when there were some city council hearings and I was asked to testify on some of the impacts of flooding in the community. This is a community that suffered a whole bunch of injustices over time, starting with urban renewal, where a whole bunch of people, thousands of people, were moved out of the community with the promise that there would be a new town center built. That town center was never built. The design of communities really has a major impact on their ecological, social, cultural texture. And in a place like Eastwick, you can see that really viscerally in the fact that a lot of the flooding in Eastwick occurs from flows that come from an upstream watershed with a very different land use than the downstream. And so there's this relationship between upstream and downstream, which is really at the core, to, you might say, to a lot of the problems there. The types of infrastructure solutions that I'm interested in have multiple layers to them. Yes, they change a physical flow of a material, right? They might prevent water from going out of a creek bank. But to me, the more fundamental question is, where do we need to manage stormwater? How much stormwater do we need to manage? And why do we need to manage it? And that why is a social question, it's an ecological question, and it's an economic question. Unfortunately, flooding has become ubiquitous, and I'm working both in Eastwick and in Camden on flooding problems and the development of solutions. So you couldn't, because if you walked any direction, it got deep.
Exactly. So we was like little when the water came up from up here, we just walked in the middle.
Had that ever happened before? Flooding in Eastwick has a whole set of local challenges, but I'm also working in Camden, where there's a different set of challenges. Camden's flooding problem has to do with a combination of factors. The city was built with a combined sewer system, so it combines wastewater and stormwater in the same pipe. The combined sewer system, because it can't convey all of those flows to the wastewater treatment plant, has these points called combined sewer overflows where it overtops into the river. One of the similarities between these two projects in Camden and Eastwick is that in both cases, what we're doing is working with the local community to find solutions. We're looking at where the water goes now, what the problems are associated with where the water goes, and how we can strategically either redirect the water or reorient the community in a way where you don't have these conflicts that were created by a history of sort of superimposing patterns of development on top of naturally flowing landscapes.
During most rainstorms, something like 70 times a year, this pipe overflows and sends combined sewage out to this area. We just had the opportunity to see a bald eagle fly overhead. So this is bald eagle foraging grounds, and it's the same place where 120 million gallons of sewage or so comes out on an annual basis. So what we're looking to do with Franco and Hasib is really a generational project. Maybe once every 100 years do you get to change the way a system works.
Look, how's the basement? Yeah. If it rains hard, drains can't handle it.
Yeah.
So the water comes up out of it.
How high does it get around here?
The alley gets flooded.
Yeah.
Especially that alley there. You go swimming back there.
Yeah. Does it smell like sewage?
After it stops.
When you have intense precipitation or a lot of precipitation, and in particular if it occurs during high tides, that water gets into the combined sewer system. The combined sewer system fills up, and you can have backups of combined sewage, which is a combination of rainwater, but also domestic sewage and industrial waste, for example, anything that's down the sewer. That's where flooding in Camden becomes more than just a physical problem. It also becomes a public health problem. If we wanted to take some measurements to be able to report how much the flooding is it the alley where you would suggest we do the measurements?
That alleyway, because behind the houses, everybody has drains.
The first step in doing this type of work is engendering trust in the communities that you're working with, that you're really there to use your science to advance or ask questions that are relevant to them, not that are purely relevant to you.
Well, we shouldn't look like a geyser.
Like a geyser. It's
Like a geyser.
Look at that. Yeah, that's like...
Yeah, and there's gaps in the mortar, so it's probably not getting out.
The mortar.
But what's interesting is it's all because of the sewer system. It's, in other words, it's not coming
Yeah,
up, it's
no.
not flowing off the road in. It's coming up.
Yeah.
It's coming up out of the sewer system. Whatever y'all can do to help it, it'd be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, so right now we're working the ideas to translate
This
all
type
that
of
data
work
into
happens
actual
at the
taking action.
pleasure of folks who trust us. But you have to earn that trust by being in the right place and being willing to ask the right questions even if those questions sometimes take you as a researcher outside of your comfort zone or outside of your realm of scientific expertise.
What a lot of people don't realize is that it's actually really hard to get good data on where it's flooding on the surface. So for years and years, we kind of had to limp along and do our best with very anecdotal kind of evidence. Some guy saying, oh yeah, Harrison and Forth, like, yeah, it floods there a lot, is a lot different from what we're getting from Hasib and Dr. Montalto, which is hard data, which is like gold to us if we're trying to actually design effective civil engineering solutions.
Let's say a global model says, well, we predict 36 inches of water rise. Well, is it 12 inches here? Or is it 36 inches here? Or is it 54? The difference of 12 inches could be millions and millions of dollars in design and construction costs. So the model that Drexel is working on with us is very localized, literally just for this neighborhood.
This community of Kramer Hill is extremely flood prone. Sometimes this street floods and a lot of the other streets flood. And when that happens, you know, people can't get to work, they can't get to school, water comes into their houses and, you know, interferes with public transit. So what we're trying to do is put sensors around the neighborhood that will tell us when it floods and how deep it floods, and then we'll use that data to validate the model.
So these are the ultrasonic sensors. We use this to measure the flow along the streets. If these streets are flooding, then like these flow meters are going to help us like understand how much was the depth of the water.
If the model is accurately predicting the flooding, then we can use it to say building in more pumps capacity.
Yeah, more green infrastructure. Yeah.
Right now we have 2 sensors in this location. We have 18 more sensors. We'll be putting the sensors in those places where we are seeing these problems. So we try to look into actual reality within the ground and then comparing that one with our model results and see whether the model will give us the same result or not. I'm just playing the recent rainfall that happened on Friday. It was intense. The results more or less close and the errors not that high, then you become happy that, yeah, something is happening. But it looks like the model is performing well.
The model is really going to help us inform us in making the best decisions possible about how to spend the money. It's a highly expensive project. We really want to make sure that we're using the best science possible. And that's where Franco and Hasib and their team are really coming through for us.
The flooding challenge is difficult because not only have we modified landscapes in very dramatic ways, removed vegetation, removed floodplains, converted surfaces from permeable to impermeable, but of course precipitation patterns are changing in different ways. In 2016, I had some students who were interested in exploring flood risks in Philadelphia, and we set up a workshop in Eastwick with some of the local community members. And then these students developed some very conceptual ideas of how flooding might be reduced.
Call it divine intervention or whatever, but we were approached by Drexel University's climate lab, Dr. Franco Montalto, who was very interested, heard about our plight, and through their NOAA grant wanted to do some research.
It was very much inspired by the belief that locals know best, that local knowledge and local understanding of what's happening would be sort of like a guidepost towards what kinds of solutions could be implemented.
Yeah, now they had a focus group meeting yesterday. Residents were very focused on, hey, we need an evacuation plan. Mm-hmm. That seemed to be the most prevalent during that discussion. There's going to be more focus groups.
Evacuation plan. So I guess that's the question. Should we add questions about evacuation plan to the survey? Drexel's role was to facilitate the community engagement piece and to make sure that what we were modeling was based on not what we thought would be useful for the community, but what the community actually wanted. We'll develop the physics, and then through the community engagement process, we would find out what the leading solutions were that the community had, and then we would put those into the model and use the model to test out the efficacy of these community-led options.
This will be a really good time to think about what we want to make sure we elevate as our core values as we assess these different options.
I'm visualizing that water coming this far from my house on just this week. Is there anything that you can help the Planet Streets as of now is what we're looking for? Can we get some help so we can sleep when it rains? Do they have a solution for that?
Not one that we're going to be implementing in the next several months. What would be helpful is if we could get to some of the longer term options that we're putting into the proposal, but I think we need a separate conversation about the interim.
Supposed to be about flooding, Corinne, or not?
Well, it is about flooding.
This meeting, wasn't it supposed to be about flooding?
Yes.
Okay.
It is, and we're trying to address multiple time horizons at one time. So I'm not talking right now about immediate flooding. But if that's what we want to talk about right now, then we can talk about that right now and not worry about the long-term stuff.
The flooding is not only economically disruptive, but it's a mental health issue. When they hear that it's going to rain or there's going to be a storm, people are concerned for their life.
This presentation is Steve Rochette from Army Corps of Engineers and his group. They're going to talk to you about what they're doing.
We have a study here in partnership with the Philly Water Department, looking at different alternatives to reduce flood risk. And we narrowed things down to two alternatives: acquisition, acquiring structures, and then the other is levee. But with the levee, there are challenges to include the possibility of making flooding worse in other areas.
How long would your study be?
I believe the latest status, Leo, is that we're hoping to have a plan identified in this calendar year, and then it does take several years at least to get to any kind of construction, if there is a recommended plan of something like a levee. So there's still, it does take time. Yes.
And we have flooding in the next 3 years. Just be flooded until you figure it out? Like, I don't understand that.
No, I understand the frustration with the process and the time. We do know that there's other things that people are doing to try to lower their risk, and we understand that. But for these studies and leading up to any kind of construction, if that does move forward, it just does take time, unfortunately.
We know that these long-term concerns are credible. However, we're in the midst of hurricane season, and we have some immediate needs. And they've been immediate since 1999. So these long-term solutions were probably on the table then. We haven't seen any movement.
Okay, it's like that. You don't even know that it's a creek. It's the overflow. I stand on my front porch.
Right.
And we see the overflow so that we can go and run to tell the people to move their car.
That's another thing that could you to do immediately would be just some kind of an alert system so that you know, hey, there's floods at Mount Moriah, upstream coming down, and it sends you a text message so you know to go move your car.
Excellent.
It takes such a toll on not just your emotional state, but your physical state, your spiritual state, and everything when you have to continually be worried about something you cannot control.
Whatever can be done to minimize those sort of risks and stressors on people is a way of I think, advancing restorative justice, helping people to feel that they're safe in the community that they call home. And I think currently many people do not feel that way.
The city has known that this community has flooded since the 1920s and has still not come up with any kind of a solution. If you look at urban renewal, back then it was really just a way of getting certain people out of communities. What it did was force segregation. It was a tool to force segregation. People of color would be moved out of places so that whites could move in. And then African Americans began to buy the homes. But what they were really buying were properties that were in harm's way, in the way of floodwaters, contaminated landfills, and homes that were sinking. And everybody turned their backs on these people.
So there are a number of strategies that are on the table for reducing flood risks in Eastwick. One of them involves building a barrier, essentially a levee along the side of Cobb's Creek. The other involves giving people money that they can use to go move somewhere else and their land becomes vacant. And then the third is this land swap concept. I started talking to Carolyn about the land swap idea, which she had and which for me made a whole lot of sense. This is a unique opportunity that is presented here in Eastwick because of the history of urban renewal.
This section is 128 acres. This was the last phase of what was to be the built-out development stemming from the urban renewal plan. Where we're standing here does not flood. It's just been a field of weeds.
There's vacant land that's city-owned that's at high elevation, and then there's low-lying land with buildings on it that floods regularly. So by simply moving the two, you could reduce flood risks and avoid one of the things that many people in the community would like to avoid, which is the need for people to have to move out of the community that they love and where they've raised their kids and their family.
There are elderly people that have already purchased their homes, not interested in moving. So if that's going to affect my decision, because I can't go if somebody else on the block doesn't want to, or maybe I don't want to. I like my neighbors. It's homes. It's not just geography to us.
There are three principles that are very important to this community in resolving this issue. Safety first, non-displacement, and being made whole. Drexel began to do the modeling that would show what the viability of this land swap could be.
We know so many other projects all over the place, how hard it is to fight nature. But if you can move people within the community to an area that naturally won't flood, and then allow the water to come into the community in other ways, to me there was a lot of exciting stuff to talk about there.
What we know right now, that seems to be a very viable option, and one of the options for consideration that is on the table.
My perspective is, like, if the science we do isn't helping you, then what good is the science? Climate change is only going to make all of this worse.
Absolutely.
And you can't wait 20 years to figure out how to deal with that. So to me, it's been an opportunity to say, all right, do we know what we're talking about? Is this really useful stuff? If it is, let's put it to work.
As climate change comes, we know that more and more water will be inundating the system and actually preventing stormwater from getting out. And that's another thing that we really want to look at. Let's say the fix is $100 million. We don't want to design the $100 million fix for today's standards. We really want to design it for what's going to happen in 2050, 2070, and 2100.
I think we need to stop looking at problems as being divorced from their context. And I think we also need to stop looking at one problem at a time. We're mostly limited by our own creativity.
Hopefully what we'll be looking at is a built-out community consisting of climate-resilient homes that can set an example of what can be done to deal with and combat climate change or the impacts of climate change, and can serve as a template for the actions that the city will take for other communities. People who will not be displaced from the community, people who are safe, and people who are made whole, occupying those homes.
The community talks about this idea of restoration of justice, but then in ecological context, we talk about restoration of ecosystems. You know, if you can restore justice and restore landscapes in the same place, that's where resilience comes from.
We're not engineers, we're not planners, but because we are in harm's way, we have been forced into a position where we have to come up with our own viable solutions. I think we are at a point now where we're saying no more. No more. The time is now.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ariella from NOAA to lead us in discussion.
Thanks. I think that before we begin, I'll ask all the panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with myself. My name is Ariella Zeigerman. I'm a program manager in NOAA's Climate Program Office in the Climate and Adaptation Partnerships Program. I'm also an advisor to the Assistant Secretary of Oceans and Atmosphere, Jamie Bavishi, where we spend a lot of time thinking about adaptation and climate services and equity, a lot of the issues that came up in this film. So I'm really happy to be here and to moderate this panel. I'm going to ask all the panelists to introduce themselves and then to give a reflection on the film, something that struck them as interesting or as mind-blowing or as something to think a little bit more about. And why don't we start? I'll go around my boxes. We'll start with you, Oleg.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Oleg Zonis. I'm Director of Engineering for Camden County Municipal Authority. Well, I don't even know. The movie was very touching. I actually watched it for the first time with my family, and it was really. They were impressed with what we do. It's touched everybody's heart. So, it's to me, it's justifies what we do on a daily basis, which is doing something better for community, for people. I don't know. To me, that was the most important thing out of that movie. We engineers, we're scientists. We can do a lot of things, but it's always nice to remind ourselves what are we here for and who we work for. So that's my take on the movie.
Thanks, Oleg. Brenda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Brenda Whitfield, a resident of the Eastwick community for over 44 years now. Whew. That film was so touching and so surreal of what the residents have been dealing with for over 20-some years, with promises coming from different organizations, or just recently, Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, Office of Sustainability, OEM, all of the people that get together to try to help us. And the expression in your faces is like, why do you continue to live in a community that keeps getting flooded? But this was not a community that was continuing to be flooded. We were in this area for over 20 years without it being flooded. By then, our families and the community had started up, we had a sense of purpose. When you're young and you're starting your family and your home and you're building a legacy, this was ideal for us. The film made me think of the beginning of coming to a community, not knowing that it was a flooded area, a repetitive flooded area. And hearing Ole speak of engineers that can do something about it gives me hope. Dealing with Dr. Franco, his students, it makes me think that if we weren't put on the back burner for so many years, we could be so much further along. We could have just moved the HESCO barriers right into the neighborhood right now. We wouldn't have been flooded over 20 some years of back and forth. I appreciate this film. I love the idea that we have so many components working together for the betterment of the community, yet we still have so much work to do. How can the Army Corps of Engineer promise a community for over 20 some years that something can be done? And when you go back to them, nothing has been put on paper yet. How does that make you feel? That someone can make a promise and yet do nothing. It makes me feel good that Franco and his crew stepped out and said, I want to help a community that has been pushed aside, mistreated, whether you want to hear it or not, it's reality. I mean, the community came to the city and we were complaining. Some of the people that you saw in that film have died. They're no longer here. And we're left to try to fulfill a legacy that they thought would never, ever come to pass. One of them actually said, I will be dead and we will still be dealing with the problems in Eastwick. And that he didn't know it at the time, but those words are valid. He's long gone, and we're still dealing with the issues out here at Eastwick. Thank you for the film. I'm hoping that it will move the parties and different organizations to come up with the solution. I hear about the levy, I hear about the buyouts, the land swap, but even with the levy, we have to remember that it's going to take more than just the levy, because that's not a guarantee. So when that excess water comes, where would it go from there? The 120 some acres with the land swap we can still have, and still have excess property to do other things with for the good of the community. We can move that water that comes from the levee to someplace else in the wetlands within our area where no one else would have to be in harm's way. Do you think I would want someone else to be in harm's way to stop me from being flooded? Of course not. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I have gone through for the last 20, 30 some years. But I thank you for this documentary, this film, hoping that it would open some eyes. I'm hoping that we would get empathy and compassion out here at Eastwick, and hope that we'll no longer be put on the back burner.
Thanks, Brenda. We hope for all of those things too. Thank you for your very personal story and reflection on the film. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Bath. I'm a program manager with the NOAA Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program. So the program that funds CC Run and some of Franco's work and encourages this. But I will admit that, we don't get enough of these opportunities to hear to see it in the as we've seen it in the video, to see the human element, to see it up front, to be in a conversation with people like you, Brenda. It changes everything, and it really reminds me about, I'm just 33 myself, and I have had 3 near misses of catastrophe with flooding in my own personal life. And one of those was in a rental that I didn't have to sort of deal with the after effects. One of those was I cited myself. It was another rental that I cited, intentionally cited myself in high ground because I was already, going through my master's education and knew about flood zones. And in the third one, it was a basement situation where well, not really flooding, but it was a mold situation that my partner got sick enough to have to apply for disability, and the disability was denied. And it was out of work for a while. And I think about how the context of the government work that we do and the science that we do, a lot of the times this human element is completely absent. And even those personal experiences that I've just said, I don't even think I've ever mentioned that to anybody at NOAA. And even though you'd think it's super relevant, and it's because the human element gets missed entirely. And I think it's partly because it's hard work to address this. I think it's as we see here in Eastwick and Camden, it's making up for lost time of all of the things that have already been done in the past. And it's hard to confront those and figure out the path forward when there's an immediacy. But my ears are very open, as I know everyone else's are here, to seeing where your leadership, Brenda, lies, and the leadership of the people involved directly at the neighborhood level, and to see, what it is we can do better to navigate what honestly is a very archaic bureaucratic system on our end as well. Like, we're constantly fighting these archaic battles every day to make things more relevant. It's kind of ridiculous what we have to put up with in order to just do something very basic. But I hear you. I hear the struggles.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for the empathy.
Thanks, Sean. Darlene, would you like to introduce yourself?
So, hello, my name is Darlene Finch. I work for NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. I work on coastal resilience in the Mid-Atlantic, which means from New York down to Virginia. I do want to thank you for inviting me. It's a really powerful film. I also want to say that Brenda's comments were even more powerful than the film, so it's kind of hard to follow on those. I do want to say that the film really reminded me that one of the things I feel that NOAA really brings to the table is the science, but the science in and of itself isn't enough. And if it isn't matched up with what the community is doing and the community cares about, it's not all that valuable. But that's kind of obvious from the film. I guess it also makes me a little sad because I feel like there are so many constraints and limitations on the solutions that we can offer. And I think that the problems are real, and we should be able to figure out how to make these systems work better to solve these problems. And it makes me sad because Eastwick is in a terrible situation, but and Camden and a whole bunch of other urban areas in the Mid-Atlantic that I'm watching this happen and watching it get worse and struggling with how do we effectively take the tools that we've got and the expertise that we have to really make a difference. And I think the universities are in a great position to offer something we can't at the national level. But I think there's even more that we need to be doing. So thank you for inviting me. Thanks for everybody for what you've shared so far. And I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thanks, Darlene. Ben, you already kicked us off and introduced yourself. And Franco, you already introduced yourself, but I am curious what your reflections are on the film, having been in it, but also do the work. Do you see a similarity between your role in the film and the realities of doing the work on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, the work is complicated. And I will say something that's like maybe, I don't know, it's a sort of a different kind of a reflection, but as an instructor, as an educator, as a professor, it's easy to come up with a neat little homework assignment for my students that avoids these issues. And that would probably make me a better instructor, right? I mean, if I could really show the theory to my students by saying, well, what if we change this? And what if we change that? But then that activity is just benefiting my students. And so what I have sort of started to try to do is to take the learning out into the field so that the work has multiple values, right? The students are learning, but the value itself is providing, a service, which is really the only thing that I care about. I mean, not that I don't care about my students, but personally, when I look, like climate change has got me, as all of us, very, very worried. And so I don't think there's time to put learning first and then impact later. I feel like learning and application kind of have to happen in tandem. But that doesn't necessarily make me an easy to work with instructor, right? I mean, these real world problems are not neat and clean. They're, but it often, it puts me in the position of having to say, what all this stuff that's in the textbook, how do I really make it count? How do I apply it in a way that's going to have benefits in the timeframes that we need? And I often feel like I come up short. That said, I think that there are, thousands and thousands of faculty and thousands of students, and there are lots and lots of communities who need work. And if we can marry those and we can make all the research that's happening in the university connected to the needs of real communities, even in places where funding is not available, I think we can help to, in a small way, push the discussion forward. And that's what I'm sort of committed to as an academic, is trying to get this research out into the real world and make it relevant. And so this work is a privilege to work on. I never feel like I'm doing it justice, but I don't know any other way to teach the relevance of my field other than trying to do the work.
Thanks for that. It resonates with one of the big takeaways that I took from the film, is the multitude of contexts that are important for engineering and relocation work and climate work generally. There are historical contexts, there's justice context, there's health and well-being context, there's budgetary context, there's cultural and social context, there's the engineering itself and the scientific context, there's a university context, there's a community member context, and that these all require a huge amount of work, a huge amount of resources, and a huge amount of commitment across many, many, many people, many organizations, many entities. And it's in that context that I think many of us struggle to get the work done, but it's really nice to see a film that sort of identifies that all these things happen in one place. And I wanted to turn back to you, Brenda, a little bit in this question of context. And you started to answer this in your first reflection on the film, but I'm curious how you felt the context of the community and the context of the community members were depicted in the film. Do you think that it was representative? Were there issues you would have liked to see that didn't make it into the film? Or did you think it was pretty accurate describing how flooding and community membership sort of interact in Eastwick?
Before I answer your question, I would like to make a comment. Having spoke in Franco's class, I want people to know the importance of youth and what Franco and his class is doing, because it was the youth that really put us on the map. Seniors just doesn't get it. They just don't seem to be able to get out of their mind frame of things. Youth brings in a different perspective. They bring in that energy for change. And I saw it when I was in Franco's class, Dr. Franco's class. This film showed exactly what the residents was going through, what we are still going through, but what it cannot express is the anxiety that an individual goes through every time it rains. It cannot give the heartfelt and what we do when it rains. We start walking the floor. We start putting out the neighbors to look at the creek to see how high it is. Why? Because we don't have an alert system. The city has an alert system, but that alert system is not relevant to Eastwick. When they say that it's flooding, it's not flooding for us. It's for flooding for different areas of the city. So it's not a warning for us. We have to use the residents within our community to go out and check that creek to see where that water is so we can alert the residents to get the bedridden residents out. And it's not easy when you have a husband that's bedridden, you have pets that you love dearly, senior citizens. It doesn't even give us enough time to move our cars. We have had so many floods and the neighbors have lost so many cars. When you saw the height of that water, it's real. But it comes up so fast and do so much damage, and then it disappears. But yes, the film showed exactly what the residents is going through. The only thing it couldn't do is to show the anxiety that we go through every time we hear a raindrop. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it brings me to my next question, which is for Ben, is as the filmmaker, what were your priorities in demonstrating the impacts of floods on the community? And, what are the filmmaking capabilities to demonstrate things like anxiety when it rains? The film does mention it, but I think that the feeling that you're talking about is a much more profound one. The feeling of anxiety. So Ben, what were your priorities in talking with residents and showing their plights?
Yeah. Well, I do want to say also, Brenda, we'll be in touch because I'm not done with this project. And that really is, I think putting the human face on it is the most important piece. As much as I think this project in particular was created to some extent for an audience that is a little more tilted maybe towards the policy, government, science community. I think that what I envision is really following the story. What I tried to do here was do a kind of dipping my toes in the water, but I think it's very important to follow these stories through the eyes and the hearts of the people who are in these situations. And I think it's hard for people to understand. I mean, just as Brenda's describing, what it's like to live in those scenarios. It reminds me a lot. I made a film about 10 years ago that was about the coast of New Jersey and in the North Carolina, and it was about development and the regular flooding that happens on the barrier islands there. And it was really kind of looking forward to when the next big storm would be. And then Hurricane Sandy hit while we were filming. And so, of course, that kind of gave an opportunity for people to express what it feels like, to have been through that storm. And there were people who expressed very similar sentiments to Carolyn in the beginning of the film, which was, she a woman whose home was just actually in Union Beach was disappeared, gone, all that was left was a foundation. Her whole street was the same way. And we walked out on the beach with her, and she said how she used to fall asleep to the sounds of the water, lapping up against the shore, but it's completely changed now, and it'll never be the same. And those things can happen overnight, like it did with Sandy, or it can happen over a long period of time, as it is in Eastwick. And I think there's a lot of different ways in which we experienced the environment and different impacts of development and climate change in different ways. And sometimes we see them as climate related or development and policy related, and sometimes we don't. And I think throughout the city, there are lots of different examples of this, from the heat islands and different communities to communities that just have really degraded housing stock and a lot of mold issues. And you can really, the way I see it anyways, is these are all part of our relationship with both the built environment around us and with nature. And as nature, as the built environment in Philadelphia over the decades has started to, need more attention, put it that way, and the environment has gotten more unstable, it just means we'd have to pay a lot more attention to trying to figure out how to kind of, fix some of the problems that are out there, and also look towards the future. And I think these are stories that can help people think about that a little bit more and think about seeing things through a different lens. And so, yeah, that's, I don't know, long-winded way maybe, but of saying that I think it's all about the human stories. And I think like we have to get past the numbers, that we read in the papers and things, about things like temperature rise and all that, and understand what all these things mean for people and for communities, and what does it actually look like, and what are the actual impacts of these changes, and how can we make them better now, and better in ways that will improve communities' ability to really be resilient in the future.
Thanks, Ben. That really resonates. It is a story of people, but as you said, sort of in the beginning of your response, that this is aimed at government and academics, and thinking about how they can relate to people in some ways, like getting a human face and a human story to understand problems in different ways. I think that's really important. And as Tashawn alluded before, it seems really difficult for us sometimes, like to make that connection in our work. And so having resources like this are really important for us to demonstrate what that looks like, and maybe inspire change to make it happen with more normalcy and more often. So I really wanted to turn a little bit to some of our government people, Oleg and Sean, and ask you, how can the academic research community constructively engage in developing solutions to real world problems? And if you have any advice or examples of where that's been very effective, or strategies that have worked to make that happen. Oleg, maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you. I'll try. Well, I think academic community has a brain and human power to effectively and efficiently develop cutting edge tools that help people like me, engineers or politicians make decisions. Like for me personally, I know how to implement things. I can build stuff, but I need somebody's help to tell me what's available and what's the better way to build stuff. What's the better way to build it faster, Brenda? In your case, how can we build something faster? What's out there that I can use as my tools? Something that I haven't used yet in my experience in my life. And I think that's where the colleges like Drexel, especially, Franco specifically, those are the colleges, universities, and professors that take this knowledge, evaluate it, concentrate it, develop it, and then bring it down to us engineers or to people and make it available and applicable to us. So that's how I see their importance in what we do on a daily basis. And obviously, as Dr. Franco said, it goes backwards as well. It's a feedback to the student community that have that real life experience, that they actually do something for solve the real problems for real people, not just the textbook problems, not problems that were developed by somebody that don't exist, don't matter. Those are the problems that matter to people on a daily basis. So that's, hopefully I try to answer what your question.
Thanks, Oleg. Sean?
There's so much to say about this, so much to the point that I think it's almost saying nothing at all. But I think a lot about different perspectives of this, from the perspective of what we actually have now, and being really happy to see work like this, and it being the right scale of humanness that needs to continue in science research. But then there's another perspective of realizing how misaligned the institutions are for actually even replicating this, but just thinking about the massive gap in the amount of resources that are going out, the amount of capacity that exists in universities now, the amount of capacity that exists in government now, the amount of money that's been going out in the past 2 years from supplemental laws like the Inflation Reduction Act. And yet, the very small degree of outcomes that we can refer to that have actually pushed the needle forward or changed things. It's I think in part because the institutions are structured the way they are, and maybe it's because I'm younger, like Brenda was saying, that if I had more influence or power over it, I would probably restructure a lot. I don't have that influence, but in thinking about this problem and thinking about the way that institutions, both research universities and government is structured, we really need to change a lot about that in order to actually utilize the existing capacity that's there. So programs like ours, the NOAA Climate Adaptation Partnerships, and a lot of other programs that are out there, maybe open the door to utilizing and connecting these resources in the right way, to connecting and empowering people like Franco who have this mindset about research and science actually meaning something directly to people. But honestly, it's a struggle to try to change those motivations that are inherent to university systems, where the primary motivators that may exist for an individual's professional success might not actually be related whatsoever to community outcomes, right? Like maybe it's more based on publications and research, and you have to get to a point of tenure before you have some flexibility, and then you may not feel comfortable with actually getting yourself literally in the floodwaters to help people. So where can we build more of those motivations in? As government to universities, or any funder to university, how can we build more of those motivations to encourage this? Because the only way forward that I think is available to us is to bring people together, and people that are actually going to stick around, that are going to see the logical outcomes of this. Funders have to be aware. Like, again, I'm very thankful for being here to be able to hear this, because it doesn't have the same impact as it's when you're reading it on paper. Funders have to be around and willing to be dedicated in their funding for a long stretch of time too, so that you can actually see those outcomes. And it's not going to be one funding source because of the variant, the different funding streams and different governmental agencies that exist, which have their little fiefdoms over responsibility. It's one of the most finite things that we say that we can do to help communities is help them get a grant of more funding to do something else. And that kind of speaks to the number of bureaucratic hurdles you have to go through in order to get something so basic as, help here and now. So, the hope that I see is in situations like this, where there's some movement forward and there's so much money out there available. I think we need to concentrate it in these human scale partnerships that actually lead to change. We can keep up with that. The scaling becomes pretty straightforward. I think if we can do this in one area, we can do it in others. But we can't fool ourselves into thinking that just releasing sort of national scale information on its own is going to get the job done. We have to actually do the human work.
Can I respond to what go ahead, Brenda.
Sean, when you said getting the funding out, that just made my ears perk up, because of the fact, as I said, with certain people, it's a one-track mind. And sometimes the solution is not in just one thing. Now, if the Army Corps is doing a levee, okay, it works in a certain way, but you might need two things to come together to make it successful. So we need you guys to put it out there where you need several things to come together to make it whole again. And that means more money. And this is where Eastwick was never on the map for getting funding to start with. And now it seems like they're just looking at one solution basis. There's several solutions out there that could help us out. But are we going to get the funding for it? Who knows? But it perked my ear to what you said. And we need I know for a fact that Eastwick needs all of you to make sure that we are made whole and just safe in our homes. But this is great for me to hear. Thank you.
Ariel, could I make a comment here?
Sure. And then Franco, you also wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm
right?
sorry, Franco, you were first.
No, I was just going to respond to Sean. You said something about academics that, you kind of need to wait until you've got tenure before you can do this. And I want to rebut that argument, because I know that's sort of like the conventional thing that academics say, that this is risky. But NOAA itself requires in many of its proposals that you articulate the potential community impact of the work that you're doing. And the National Science Foundation, requires that you quantify broader impacts. And I would say that if your broader impacts are, we're going to present our work to the community, and then they'll somehow magically make things better. To me, that's not that profound. That's not really a broader impact. But if you as an academic can take those same requirements and say, we're going to make them tangible, and the broader impacts are going to be to co-produce or to engage, not just engage, but involve the people who are supposed to benefit from your research in the actual implementation of that research. You can do it even as a junior faculty person. And I mean, one other thing about publishing papers, I've published papers. They're not often the papers that I might think I'm going to publish, because this type of work sends you in all kinds of directions, and you end up, observing that there's a really interesting sort of scientific challenge that you could not have anticipated if you hadn't been looking at the actual context. And so you can write a paper about that, and that can advance you in your career. But so I just wanted to kind of rebut that argument that this is something that researchers can only do when they're gray like I am, and and comfortable. I think we should all be thinking about how to do it at whatever stage we're at. And I just wanted to say that.
Sean, do you want to respond?
Say something?
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just say that no, that's a very, very, very point well taken. And I was thinking more of the overall landscape of where are the motivations to encourage that. I think there are more nowadays, because when I see a proposal come around from a young academic that is more willing to do this, like that speaks very highly of them. So yeah, I definitely would want to encourage anybody who's thinking about this to go out and risk take, because it's increasingly being rewarded.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Franco. Darlene?
Well, I have one comment. Every time Brenda speaks, I get disconnected from this meeting. There is something about her energy that kicks me out of this meeting. So if I get kicked out, please forgive me. I've been with NOAA for a long time. This may sound a little bit like heresy to the other feds on the call, but I really think the federal government needs to rethink how we resource communities, because I think the way we've been constructed is we are designed to hand out money for very specific purposes, for very specific things. And when Brenda said, great, we have a levy, but what else? We're not really good about thinking about solving these problems in a cohesive fashion. And so while a community wants an information, wants to think about it as, how do I solve this? How do I solve all my flooding problems? Not just that flooding on that street and that flooding on that street, or this. How do I look cohesively at my community and make a difference? I think we really don't do that very well as the federal government, despite the fact that we really do try to collaborate across the agencies. So I think we might need to figure out how to get out of our own way to be really committed to helping out communities, but to step back and let communities lead. They need to be the ones who are leading this. And that's a really hard thing for us to do, because we consider ourselves really good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, but sometimes we need to step back and say, the communities have really good solutions here. And we don't need to spend all our time requiring them to report on every little dollar. We need to figure out how to address the suite of problems that they've got versus the model we've got now. Okay, so now I can retire after I make a comment like that, but I just had to say it.
Bravo, Darlene, bravo.
Well, that makes me actually want to change my next set of questions. So bear with me, panel, as I change it. The next set of questions was really about relationships between academics and community members, but I'd like to broaden it to say relationship between government or academics and community members, and really build off what Darlene said a little bit. And so, maybe I'll start with you, Brenda. You seem to have a great relationship with Franco, which is very cool, and that you went to his class, and that, it's great to hear. I'm wondering what for people in the audience who might be building their own relationships across these sort of separate kinds of places and institutions, what are the characteristics of a good relationship between academia or between government and a community?
First of all, it has to be a listening ear. You have to be willing to listen to the needs of the community. Then you don't have a problem with reaching out to the youth. If you guys could have seen those college students when I was speaking and telling them what the community was going through, their faces was, what can I do to help you now? How did it, oh, I want to do something, but baby, you don't have no money. Your mom and daddies is putting you through college, but their faces was, I want to, in the future, do something to help you out and help your community out. So it's first listening, pleading your case, which we do all the time. I don't even understand if you talk to the politicians and tell them about the college students, how the community is running, I'm not sure if they're even listening to what our agenda is. I know that those students are listening and they care. I know that Franco cares about improving the situation and the agenda in the community, because if he didn't, he wouldn't take the extra steps that he's taken. My mom and daddy used to say, if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk it as well. So having been in the classroom and seeing the kids and the papers that they put out, they don't have to write about Eastwick. They write about Eastwick because it's something that interests them. So you can tell whether someone is concerned by how their actions and what they do to make it better. Do you care? If you care, then you would do the work. If it's something that is just going to put you in office, then we're going to suffer. So this is why I listen to the college kids, because that's our future. I listen to Franco because he is making sure that they get what they need to go out here to get the work done. And that's not easy. That's not easy. In today's society, people are not doing the work to make sure that the people, that our youth know what is needed of them. And Franco, by stepping out, taking the extra step, is making sure our future is being built up to help us now. And that's what I appreciate. That's why I don't have a problem speaking, even in the midst of the storms and the 8 feet of water. I know it's going to get better. And it's going to get brighter because of the future that we're building up. and they're going to make you old people see what needs to be done. Okay? I believe in them 100%. Because that's how we got here now. It was because of you. Nobody was listening to us. We were dying by the numbers, and they still wasn't listening to us. So this is the reason why I have that relationship, because that's our future. And the future is being taught by a professor named Franco, Dr. Franco.
Thanks, Brenda. Franco, from your point of view, what makes a good relationship between an academic and a community?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm touched by all that. I don't think I deserve all of that you said, Brenda. I mean, all I tried to do is make sure that we are focusing on real problems and not made up problems. That's really, and I think and I'll say another thing. I mean, Brenda hit it on the head when she said that the students bring a certain energy. I've found many times that the students can say things publicly, and you may say, oh, it's a naive comment by a student in a classroom, but it's actually a quite astute comment that comes from someone who's not steeped in bureaucracy and, well, we would never be able to do that because we've never been able to do that. And so I'm not even going to bring it up. The students coming to these problems put things on the table that we all should be talking about, but often rule out before we even, get into. And so to me, I think, part of this there has to be a reciprocal relationship, but there has to, we have to focus on real world problems. There have been situations where I've tried to create a relationship in a community where, what we could offer and what the community needed were not matched well because of just what I can't go beyond what my skill set is, right? I would never try to be what I'm not and try to offer a certain set of services that I didn't feel like I was knowledgeable about. So, you have to have unique matching between the skill sets of the university and the needs of the community. And that takes some time to identify. And I would say, back to Sean's comment earlier, I mean, that is what I think holds back a lot of academics, is that it takes a lot of time to figure out who the stakeholders are. And if you're going to put their needs at the front of the discussion, you need to not just figure out who they are, but listen, as Brenda said, and hear, and then go back and digest, and then think about what you can do based on what you heard. And that all takes a lot of time. So, it is easy to say, that's complicated. I'm just going to make up a little problem. Like, what if it was like this and like that, and then have the students think about it. But then you just missed the boat right there. So it takes time, it takes energy, it takes listening, it takes putting student ideas up front. It puts community needs sort of driving the whole thing. I'll just say, my work in Oleg's community in Camden started with a class that I had to teach on hydrologic modeling. And rather than model anything, this is going back to 2010, I contacted the CCMUA and said, hey, I know it floods there. Is there anything that we can do? And so we were able to make the flooding problem part of the class. And it satisfied me because it was something that the students then did extra effort, dedicated extra effort to, because they knew it was a real world problem. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I'm kind of rambling around and around, but it definitely has to be done delicately and with mutual respect, and through a matchmaking process where the science that can be delivered is delivered in the place where it is actually needed.
And that surely goes back to Brenda's point that it starts with listening and empathy. So you can't come up with a localized solution that's usable and relevant if you're not listening to begin with and thinking creatively. So I think it does answer the question. Before we go to audience questions, I'm going to ask Darlene to sort of wrap us up with the same question of what do you think makes a good relationship between maybe government and a community to do this kind of work? Unless we'll give her a second since we know that she keeps getting thrown off.
You asked me that question. Would you ask me the question?
I would ask you the question again. I will ask you. Are you there? It looks like you froze again.
And it's really unstable.
I think you're back now, though, so I'll take advantage. I'll ask you the question again.
Okay, go ahead.
The question is, what do you think makes a strong relationship between maybe a government agency and a community in order to get work done?
Well, I think there has to be trust, and there has to be some commitment that they're there for more than just a quick glimpse. I mean, I find that it works really well when we have partners who are on the ground, who are actually, could be a university, it could be local planners, it could be somebody else who's out there working with them on a regular basis, who understands the context within which they're operating, and also has connections with the community, and also develops relationships with people in that community who are opinion formers and opinion holders and who really care about their community. So I think it's really about those relationships and the trust and being able to sustain that trust and being able to respond to it. It's not just listening, it's also being able to hear and to be able to come back with, that may not be I may not have expertise there, but I'm also going to be able to help you find that somewhere else. So I think it's got to be a mutual relationship of having a dialogue about what the challenges are and trying to figure out how to solve it, and not just walk in and say, well, I can only talk to you about this piece of it because that's the only piece that I know. Really walking into those conversations and saying, let me help, and I'll try to figure out who else I need to pull into the conversation to solve that. So I think all of those are really fundamental. I think it's really hard for the government to do that. I mean, we are trained to say, we're here to help, we're here to solve this problem for you, which is really not the right place you need to be starting. You need to be starting by asking, what do you need? Versus, this is what we can do for you. I made it through that whole answer.
That really resonates. It's what do you need help with first? Not we're here to help. Oh, like, did you want to say something too?
I just want to add a couple things here, if I may. I think Darlene started or introduced a very good point, but I think as a government agency, to develop trust, or actually more importantly, maintain a trust, public trust, we actually have to deliver something. It's not about just talking about it and coming back and say, well, we'll come back in 5 years, we come back in 10 years, we come back in 20 years, and we're still looking at something, we're still evaluating. There are always a low-hanging fruit that you can attack immediately. I mean, immediately, I don't mean to, next day. But I'll give you our example in Camden. Drexel still helps us with model and predicting and other tools that we need looking in the future. But in the last 10 years, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars to resolve flooding that we knew existed. We knew how to get it fixed because we knew the system. We knew what needs to be cleaned, replaced. We have the tools to address immediate problems. The government agency should take an ownership of a problem and resolve it. And I think that's how you develop and maintain the trust. We all have difficulties with money, but at the same time, we all have money. We don't exist in vacuum. We based on ratepayers, we get money every month. There is money. So there is a solution, the short-term solutions that could and should be provided to the people. It's a disgrace to allow people live in the conditions that Brenda's community lives in or Camden used to live. I mean, you can ask Camden residents the conditions that they live now are much, much better than they were 15, 20 years ago. Again, they're not the best, but they're better. And that's how they trust us. That's why we have to trust with community. So that's my point. You have to take an ownership as a government organization, and you have to deliver immediate solutions. Doesn't matter how small they are. So I'll leave it at that.
That's very powerful. And I feel like everybody should live by those words. Thanks, Oleg. I'm going to move to the Q&A box and to the audience questions. Carl has asked a series of questions. They all seem to be about options for managing urban flooding, and wanted to know if there are thoughts about infiltration areas for urban areas, creating riparian forest buffers to absorb flooding, detention basins on vacant lots or underground storage with pump discharge. But I think the question is really, how did you determine what the possible solutions were for Eastwick or maybe for Camden? What were those considerations for engineering solutions, considering all of sort of the contextual issues that were at play? And I'm not sure, maybe Franco or Oleg, you might be best poised to answer those questions.
Go ahead, Frank. You start. I'll yeah. Thank you.
Well, I can talk about Eastwick, and then, I mean, in Eastwick, the project that was described in the film is really a variety of universities involved, all funded by NOAA. So, Stevens Institute, Hunter College, University of Pennsylvania, Drexel, and the Philadelphia Water Department is on the grant as well. We have two different grants. Drexel's role was to figure out what to model based on community engagement. And so the options that we are currently modeling involve the Army Corps' levee, the land swap concept, which came from the community, and variations of those, including upstream management of stormwater. So looking in the upstream watershed and saying, what's reasonable, like how much stormwater could be kept up there and not come down and cause flooding in Eastwick. So those ideas all came out of engagement, right? So it wasn't us sort of saying, this is what I think would be a good engineering solution, although I had to kind of bite my tongue because I have my ideas as well, but let those go. So for the upstream green infrastructure, we actually sent individuals who were part of our team to all of the 34 municipalities up there and found out what they thought was reasonable in terms of stormwater capture up there. The land swap concept came from community members in Eastwick, and so we spent a lot of time trying to understand exactly how that would work. And the levee, we've tried to the best of our ability to model what the Army Corps has proposed. So these ideas come out of an engagement process, because we thought that asking the questions that are already on the ground was the right first place to start, right? And then then we can, once we see how those solutions compare to one another, we can start to propose ways of changing them or blending them together, as Brenda was saying, like, so that it's not just this or that. It's like, hey, well, maybe you could mix this with that and come up with some hybrid solution that touches a lot of different bases and makes a lot of people feel whole in different ways. So it comes out of engagement, I guess, is the answer from the Eastwick case, but I'll let Oleg talk about what we're modeling in Camden.
Well, I guess there's a lot of similarities as well. Community engagement led us to understanding the issues, which is flooding in that specific community, and we did want to know a little bit more about. Like I said, we had some idea about the issues, but we wanted to get more precise problem areas or systemic problem. And also, and I think to the bigger extent, we wanted in a solution, looking for solutions, we wanted to address multiple issues that we're dealing with, such as, increase in rain intensity, rain precipitations, also increase in water rise in the river. And I think the modeling that Drexel provides is the best tool for that. The multiple, solving the multi-unknown equation, at the same time. And so that's the modeling that's been done so far, and it's being bettered, every day, is giving us that opportunity of spending money in the future to create a better solution to the problem that community has. But at the same time, like I said, we are not sitting idle. We are investing in improving system to best of our knowledge today, at least restoring the capacity of the system. Here's the thing: the system has a capacity that was lost over mismanagement and lack of maintenance over 50 years. And that's on us, that's on government, it's the people that didn't do their job before us, and now it's our turn to fix it. So we are fixing what we have right now not to completely solve the problem, but minimize the problem. Instead of having flooding 60 times a year, we're now maybe having it 3 times a year. It's still 3 times a year that people struggle, but it's not 60. So our goal right now is immediate improvement of situation, and we're working with Drexel to completely resolve the situation, and not just today, as you heard in the movie, not just for today, not in 10 years, not in 20 years, but looking 30, 50 years from now, making sure we're addressing everything, all the climate change issues, all the future concerns, and spending money wisely today. So that's the Camden situation.
Thanks to both of you. Bhaskar, I apologize. I'm going to skip one of your questions because I think there's a second question that really flows nicely with Oleg's answer. And that's in the video. There's a segment where Brenda says something about the here and now, like it's flooding right today. It's hurricane season today. What are we going to do about today instead of planning for the future? And do communities have to choose one over the other when they think about climate solutions? And how do we sort of balance that in thinking about safety and well-being? And I'm not really sure who's best to answer that, but I will take volunteers.
I'll give a first crack at it. I think for the community, now is more important. You can't allow people live in the conditions, in flooding, in mold, and this is just not acceptable. I think it's up to us to look in the future and develop proper projects and model it properly. But I think as a utility, we owe people today a better life, better lifestyle. So for us, it's both. I guess the answer for the government agency, it's both. But we can't lose track of today.
So can I hop in? I think it has to be both. I think a community has to think about solving it in the near term and solving it in the long term. I think it's who's offering the solution that's the problem. And sometimes the mandate is, for the Corps of Engineers, the mandate is you want a long-term solution there, which is fine. That's what they're supposed to be doing. But the problem is today, and the problem is next week, and the problem is the month afterward, which, I go back to my earlier point, is we offer solutions, but we don't offer comprehensive solutions sometimes at the federal level. And I think we really need to do a much better job of looking across those, because the same agency that's going to help you with emergency alerts is not the same person that's going to give you the build the levee that's going to help you in the 20, 50, 100-year time frame. So I think it behooves us as government representatives to do a better job having that communication about how do we solve the whole spectrum of what is affecting them as flooding, not now and into the future, not just in the future.
And I just want to add one thing that I think, there's a tendency that I'm concerned about sometimes, that if we do something now, we think we'll come back and do something later. But often, because we have so many problems, right, that often we do something now, then we get distracted by other problems and we don't come back and do something later. And so I call it like a path dependency, that like when, you know, once I do this, it kind of makes sense for me to keep doing that rather than to dramatically shift. And so, you know, one of the places where I've been quite interested in this question is with green infrastructure, right? Because we're often designing green infrastructure not to solve flooding, right? Green infrastructure is not being built to solve flooding problems. Green infrastructure is being invested in heavily to solve routine stormwater problems, to reduce sewer overflows, to address MS4 requirements. And so we design it, you know, for a certain storm. But if we thought about how those practices, if they were made a little bit bigger, or if we went above and beyond what we have to do for water quality improvement, there could be this secondary value of those same investments. In other words, you might be spending more than you have to solve your water quality problem, but then you're allowing that water quality investment to also have a water quantity benefit. And so, you know, one of the things like in Eastwick that's quite interesting, and I see Fatima is she's one of the PhD student who showed this to us, was that if you look at the upstream communities and what they're proposed in terms of stormwater management, they're saying, you know, at most 10% of their impervious surfaces would receive some kind of stormwater management project in the future. That's kind of what's in the existing plans. They might change those plans. And if you use our model to look at that, it doesn't solve the flooding problem in Eastwick. They could all do that. Eastwick will still flood. But if that were 20% or 30%, now that's above and beyond probably what they have to do, but 30%, we start to see that stormwater management has a value for flood protection in Eastwick. So how do you get into, you know, how do you get into these questions where it's not this or that, but you start to think about how do we accomplish this and that together in the same project? And that's going to stretch us all, because, you know, it doesn't align nicely with our regulatory requirements. It doesn't align nicely with our capital budgets or our, you know, everything else. But I really think we have to get there if we want to avoid these kind of trade-offs between it's either that or this. I can't do both.
I heard you say something about me saying we needed help now. Can you guys believe that that statement brought about the conversation about HESCO barriers? I never knew anything about it. Just so you know, I'm an old woman, 75 years old, okay? And the fact that I'm saying to them, oh my goodness, can we get something now? And someone brings up HESCO barriers. I never heard of it. But can you believe I'm having a conversation 20, 30 years? Can we get something now while you're trying to get a levy put on paper? While we're trying to get land swap? While we're trying to get buyouts? Can you just do something now? 30 years later, they said, well, perhaps we can bring about HESCO barriers. I mean, I don't know anything about that. I'm telling you what my problem is. Can you just help me? Can you just help? And after 30 years of begging, I hear that we have HESCO barriers. I mean, you guys probably know all about it, but this old woman didn't know anything about it. And the Army Corps of Engineers said, well, we can do a levy. And as you can see, it's 40 years later, and we're just getting something on paper for Eastwick. Just getting something to present to the community. Now, how would that make you feel as a citizen of the United States of America, that you're begging and pleading to help me, and 30 years later, you're presented from the Army Corps of Engineers a draft on a levy and saying, well, it might present flooding in another area. How long? How long? And I realize that they say the government takes a long time, but I don't know. We need to just reassess how we do things. As you said, Darlene, we really need to assess how we do things and how we present ourselves to the community. Trust. Trust. How do you earn trust that way? Olay, how do you earn trust that way?
Well, I shared my opinion, and I'm very strong on that opinion. And I think that we as utilities owe to the community. We operate a wastewater treatment plant. Where are the wastewater treatment plants built? In a justice communities, in a cheap land where not everybody lives there. Only people of certain economic status end up, not because they wanted to. This is where they end up living. Nobody else wanted wastewater plant. Nobody wants live in a low-lying land.
Right.
Mansions built in a low-lying community, and if they are, those are elevated houses. And if they flood, they elevate them next year. They find solutions to that problem immediately. So again, what I said is there are solutions. Nobody should be waiting 20 years to get out of a flood. This is not acceptable. And I pride myself on taking responsibility and taking pride in what I do. But again, not everybody does. Some people like to study and investigate a lot and do nothing at the end. Franca, not the educational community. I'm talking about government. I'm talking about utilities. People find a way not to do things. So no, there are ways to do it. Whether, like I said, whether it's a short term or long term, but there is the way to do it, and you just wanted to do it. And funding is always an issue, and funding should always be discussed. And some utilities have more of it, and some have less. But that's where the federal comes in. And as Sean mentioned and Darlene mentioned, there's tons of money today. Today, there's tons of money. Federal government put billions of dollars out there, and they are available for any utility, especially for environmental justice communities, especially for low income communities, especially for flood areas, flood prone areas, elimination of flood programs. It's all available. Darlene, I see you want to. I thought Darlene, you wanted to comment on it, but I'm sorry.
No, I'm thinking about the difference between your Camden and Eastwick is you can do some maintenance. I appreciate everything you're saying, and I'm agreeing. The government has to deliver. And I'm also really appreciating the fact that you have a system that you could improve its performance that would help eliminate the problem. I don't think that's a situation in Eastwick. I actually think we're in a much tougher situation where we put people in harm's way and don't really have an immediate solution to get people out of harm's way. And so it's just like this nonstop cycle of trying to figure out what the long-term solution is. And because we never get to the solution, the residents have been sitting there for 40 years saying, help us, and it doesn't progress. So I'm not disagreeing, Oleg, with anything that you're saying. I absolutely am agreeing. I'm just feeling like, if there was a way to make a difference with the systems that are already there, that would be so great. But I don't think there is. I feel like that it is such an extensive problem because of where the community was placed. Cleaning out the storm sewers isn't going to help them. It's really got to be a much bigger solution, and there's no excuse for the amount of time it's taken to address it.
Yeah, I that was just my example of our system, obviously.
No, I get it, and I love it. I mean, I love it. I'm like, go for it.
I mean, there's an issue of, I mean, in Camden, the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority manages the whole system. And, so decisions about that CCMUA.
We don't. We have no ownership of City of Camden at all. We do it out of respect, and Camden doesn't have a leadership that we have. Camden might not have as much money as we can get. We took upon ourselves to help the community that we are situated in, that we have no jurisdiction over, except that we are partners. And we made a commitment to the community, and that's what we're doing. So no, Frank, I want to correct you. We have not, this is not our system.
Sure, no, 100%. I just meant that Camden County includes Camden City, whereas with Eastwick, we're out of the county in other municipalities. And, the complexity of the governmental coordination that's required is quite great. I mean, it's so I just wanted to make that point, because I think, there's something like 32, 34 communities that live in I think 3 or 4 different counties, in addition to the city of Philadelphia, whose decisions collectively lead to a flooding problem, right? Or have led, or land use questions that have collectively led to a flooding problem. And that's a non-trivial level of decisions that would need to be aligned and plans that would need to be coordinated in order to get an outcome, which I think is different than the Camden situation, where you've got the county and the city, and you've got this county that is doing things in the city that maybe it doesn't have to, but I just wanted to make that point.
So Franco, there's another question in the chat from Abigail, who says climate change predictions are consistently surpassed, and someone mentioned the need to think far in the future and to build systems that keep these communities safe through 2100. What can we do when development in Philadelphia is moving in a furious pace and the choices made in other communities will impact Eastwick? And I think that is a little bit what you're talking about, is that there's a governmental structure where things are happening in different places, and the decisions that are made here are much more complex than any one county or any one government organization. Can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe the relationship between development and decision making and climate impacts over time, and how Eastwick is looking at actually being able to implement choices?
Well, I'll just say one thing. With the NOAA AdSci grant that we received, which is the second grant that we received, we developed a watershed partners team. And that, to my knowledge, was the first time that individuals from all the different counties, all the different towns, all the different nonprofit, like, NGO groups, Philadelphia, all of these were all brought together. We have something like 45 people on this watershed partners team. And we do something called collaborative team meetings, where we do some research, we come to the meeting, we talk about it, they give us information. And so that's one way that we've tried to address this kind of balkanization of the landscape into different, jurisdictions, was to try to bring together. And actually, since Noah's on the call, I'm really curious, how do we keep that going after the grant ends? Because I think it's really been a powerful group. In fact, that group is now collectively considering submitting comments on the Army Corps project. So it's like a watershed set of comments coming together, which I think, that's been really interesting. The other point I'll make is that in the modeling that we do, I'm not a climate scientist, I'm an engineer. I don't pretend to be a climate scientist. What I do is I get the range of projections that are out there by climate scientists, and then we use them in a stress tests type of a situation. So we say, well, and some, like Oleg and I were in a meeting just last week where we were talking about, hey, do we put in the precipitation projections, the high-end precipitation projections for 2100, or, do we use what we think might be the case in, 2070, and then once we design for that, we look at this other. So there are ways of taking the uncertainty in the climate data and factoring it into what if scenarios that you then perform to make sure that you're not going to end up blindsided by something that I think is the spirit of Abigail's question. Yeah, of course, yeah, we keep finding out that our climate projections are not, you know, we're missing, things are happening faster than we expect in some cases. So I think it's really important to represent all of those in the work that we're doing, and even the ones that seem quite extreme, and then have folks like, you know, like Brenda's colleagues in Eastwick, or like Oleg's colleagues at CCMUA, decide based on what we show them, well, we can't really plan for that, we're going to plan for this, or you know, actually I'm really worried about that. You may say it's a low probability situation, but I'm really worried about it. We need to think about that. And then that expands the discussion into areas where you know, that are uncertain, but critical and important to folks on the ground.
Thanks. There's also a few questions in the chat from Bhaskar and Diane about the land swap. And, you know, I want to spend a couple seconds on that because it did come up in the film as a pretty profound and resonant idea with people who were living there. And part of the question is how, when you do a land swap, do you prevent green gentrification? And the other part of the question is how does a land swap fit in with the Army Corps' levy plans? And how are all of these things sort of balanced in the consideration of solutions? So I was wondering if somebody on the panel could start to address the land swap and its status and how it's sort of being considered in the context of all these other possibilities.
Brenda, you want to take that one?
Okay, the land swap was brought to the community, and they basically told the residents, if you do the land swap, whatever situation you're in right now, meaning if someone old on their home or whatever, they go to the new home, whatever situation they had in their present state of being will be in the new property that they moved to. The community, the residents was like, have that property been tested for contamination? Are we jumping out of the frying pan into the fire? And if we did take the land swap, will we still be able to do the levee, which is not guaranteed for flooding, but at the same time, will you be able to talk about the nature-based solution wherein the water can go into the wetlands in another area that's close by? It was just so many unanswered questions with the land swap situation. And the people, the residents, we just weren't getting the right answers that we felt that we needed, because we were said to Hines, there are 128 acres there that you could build homes, but at the same time, part of that land could be used for the levee and redirect the excess water in a different direction. So we're like, this is another 50 years. I won't be here to talk about it. I'm telling you my story now. But basically, no. The land swap, we want to work on it. Raincoat can point us in the right direction, but we just didn't want to be going to land that, you know, the city haven't said whether or not contamination that is worked in. We know that EPA has taken the contamination out of the area that we're in now. So we're not dealing with contamination and flooding. We're just dealing with flooding right now, and some other problems within the neighborhood. But that's our main issue right now. So we go to land swap. We already put in the work and the time in our homes now. Can you guarantee us that we will be made whole, that we will be safe in an environmental process with the land swap? We have questions that have not been completely answered. Have the land been tested for contamination? How long will it take them to get this land prepared for us to do land swap? It's different now because we have been made aware of. Before, when you don't know, you don't know. But once you know the situation, you don't want to be put in that situation again. So that's what we're dealing with.
It's a lot of unanswered questions.
That's how we
Thank you.
felt. That's how we felt.
Yeah, I can just add that the different solutions that are out there, there's a couple of things that I will say. One is that they differ significantly in terms of what's being asked of people, whether you have to move, whether you don't have to move, whether you and your neighbors have to all agree to move together or not.
Right.
They differ in terms of cost. They differ in terms of their ability to protect against what's happening now versus what's happening in the future. They have different sort of physical forms and long-term implications for this community. So there's lots of legal and time-related factors. And as we get into the question that we were talking about earlier, the community needs a solution now. Some of these solutions will take a long time. But one thing that's become clear to me is that even in this conversation in Eastwick, I feel like there's still a lot of it's either this or that or this or that, but actually a lot of these solutions can work together. There are ways of creatively bringing together, the critiques of the ideas that are already out there and saying, okay, so we could tweak the levy in this way and also get a nature-based solution. And then we could maybe move it in this area. So these residents who want to move, they can move, but those don't, they stay. There are ways of bringing together some of the high points of these different ideas and getting solutions, but that part is a really challenging discussion to have. How do you bring it all together?
Yeah, I that resonates and also refers back to what Darlene was talking about before, is that it's hard to find the right bodies to be willing to bring it together, because we're also siloed in government with funding and with how we approach questions. And so bringing that all together can be very, very challenging at multiple levels to really, meld the solutions together. We're at time, so I want to first apologize to all of the viewers for your excellent questions that I didn't get to. The Q&A was very, very long, and I'm just so sorry that I couldn't get to all of them. I want to thank the panelists for such a robust conversation. It was so interesting. I learned a lot, and I feel really inspired to keep supporting this kind of work and working towards these relationships that come up with different kinds of solutions and creative solutions and solutions that fit all the contexts that need to be considered when thinking about climate risks, both in the present and in the future. And I guess I'll just hand it back to Franco or Nikki to close us down.
Thank you, Ariella, for doing such a great job in facilitating this conversation. These are really tough issues. And a special thanks to Ben for making the film that inspired all this discussion, because if it wasn't for that film, we wouldn't have gotten into all these little sort of fine but important points about what we're trying to do. And thanks to NOAA for funding the film, which of course wouldn't have happened without NOAA's support. So that's it. And thanks to all of you for attending, and we'll see you next month.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.